Well, good evening. We are so glad that you took time to join us this evening as we continue with our study on the book of Daniel. Tonight we're going to be looking at Daniel chapter 3, and of course it's the story about the three Hebrew children in the fiery furnace. It's kind of unusual, quite honestly, because Daniel, as you well know, is a book that contains a lot of prophecy. But Daniel also seems to give us a storyline, if you will, of a couple of events that took place in King Nebuchadnezzar's life. And tonight, as we look at chapter 3, this is one of those occasions of God speaking to a heathen king and revealing himself to Nebuchadnezzar once again that he is the one true God. So picking up tonight with Daniel chapter 3, I invite you to find a Bible and read along with us as if you would care to, but beginning with verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald called aloud, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning, fiery furnace." So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, harp, and lyre, in symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning, fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? Now, if you are ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made, good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning, fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning, fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be made known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning, fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning, fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound in the midst of the burning, fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." "Look," he answered, "I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire. And the satraps, administrators, governors, and the king's counselors gathered together. And they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. May the Lord honor his word and bless our time together as we study. Here in Daniel chapter 3, it records the remarkable courage and faith that Daniel's three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, displayed by their refusal to bow to an image made by Nebuchadnezzar, in spite of an announced penalty of death in a flaming furnace for disobedience. There is no explanation provided for us here where Daniel was and why he does not himself appear in the story. It may very well have been that he was out of town on business for the king, or he may have been ill. We really don't know. However, his three friends are called upon to show their own sterling quality, and they do so in a most commendable manner. No indication is given as to the year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign at the time of this event. The incident followed the time of the king's dream of the second chapter, because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are presented here in verse 12 as already set over the affairs of the province, a status given at the close of that occasion. Now, it's believed by most scholars that a period of 3 to 5 years had passed between these two events, and a helpful clue may come from a more likely reason for making the statue. This is that the king wanted to assure himself of the allegiance of his official family to the Babylonian religion, especially those members from the young foreign trainees who have been appointed to office throughout his kingdom. In respect to these recent additions, he had earlier solicited their allegiance indirectly by insisting that they eat food which had been first dedicated to the Babylonian gods. And if you remember, we read about that in Daniel chapter 1. Now, he desired to force their direct submission by demanding that they openly bow down to this image. The chapter begins with the indication that Nebuchadnezzar made a great image and gave the command for all of his official family to bow before it, making clear the penalty that would be involved for disobedience. Nebuchadnezzar's decision to make a great image was not unique to him. Many ancient rulers made statues, often of themselves, as symbols of their dominion. Frequently, such statues were inscribed with stories of the ruler's own conquest and other accomplishments. This statue had the appearance of a man rather than just a pillar, and was 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. The fact that people were commanded to worship this image would seem to indicate that it was related to the Babylonian religious system. All who would bow before it would be giving their allegiance and worship accordingly. The material from which the image was made have been suggested by the dream statue that Nebuchadnezzar had in chapter 2. And you remember in that statue, in the dream that he had, the head was made of gold. However, the image was not solid, but rather it was likely overlaid with gold plates, something that was not unusual for the day. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 40, verse 19, it speaks of such images that were made by workmen in the day. And it says there, the workman molds an image, the goldsmith overspreads it with gold, and the silversmith casts silver chains. However, the view of such an image, dazzling in the sunlight, would have been quite impressive and intimidating. It was set up on the plain Dura, which the name Dura itself means a walled place, or an enclosing wall. The designation here may have been that of a flat plain enclosed by surrounding mountains. Nebuchadnezzar has a dedication ceremony planned, and representatives of all the provinces of Babylon are required to attend. A herald calls out this proclamation here in verses 4 through 6. He says, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." Note that throughout this chapter, there is much repetition of phrases, and this is one that is repeated often. The words "fall down" and "worship" were the crucial ones, however, for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where they confirm the fears that these three men may very well have had. Nebuchadnezzar was insisting that everybody bow down and worship this image. This would mean a recognition of the false gods it represented, and they knew that they could not comply and still remain loyal to the one true God, Jehovah. So, when the music sounded, all the people, except the three young Hebrew men, bowed to the image. Because all others bowed, they were very conspicuous, and certain Chaldeans drew Nebuchadnezzar's attention to the fact that the three men had disobeyed the king's demand. In all probability, they were probably jealous, because an ethical identification is made here in verse 12. Notice it says, "There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up." Well, as you can imagine, Nebuchadnezzar became furious, and in a rage, he spoke out against their defiance. He had put forth great effort that this would not happen, that the penalty had been made very severe, and the order was clear. They had to be held accountable because Nebuchadnezzar could not risk anyone else following suit. He would give them, however, one more chance to comply, and if they did not, they would be cast into the furnace. He ordered them to be brought before him, and he once again rehearsed in their hearing the decree that they should bow and worship the image at the sound of the music. The response given by the three Hebrew men in verses 16 through 18 is commendable. Let me read it again in your hearing. "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, 'O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this manner. If that is the case, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be made known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up.'" This was not an answer of arrogance, but rather one of admission. They had nothing to say in the way of denial because they had, in fact, not bowed down to the image. Notice they were not voicing any uncertainty as to God's ability to delivering them, but only to his willingness. They were not sure that he would choose to deliver them. The courage displayed in this statement should not be missed by the reader. Nebuchadnezzar had just declared that no God could deliver them out of his hands, and now they were replying confidently that their God could do so. As you can imagine, this only infuriated him even more. These three men were ready to risk all in their earnestness to give a proper witness to their God. This same desire to give a proper witness had no doubt been a major factor in their earlier refusal to bow down before the image. To bow would have been to destroy the value of their prior statements to others regarding the supremacy of their God. Knowing that actions speak louder than words, they had remained standing without wavering. They were ready to obey God. Whether he chose to deliver them from the furnace or not, they would not bow down. Upon hearing their answer, Nebuchadnezzar gave the command to make the furnace 7 times hotter than usual, and he commanded that certain strong men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. The furnace was probably a lime kiln with flames shooting out of the top, with an opening at the bottom to remove the ashes. Having bound the young men, the soldiers carried them to the furnace and cast them in, likely through the top opening. The king had spoken urgently. He had spoken harshly, shown by his changed countenance and the tone of his voice. The strong men recognized that he wanted immediate and full obedience. So the soldiers did as commanded. They did succeed in reaching the mouth of the furnace and cast the 3 Hebrew children into the flames. But they themselves were killed in doing so. Because remember, the furnace had been heated up 7 times hotter than usual. And the heat was so great that their flesh was burned and their breath was sucked from their lungs. While the strong soldiers were falling in death outside the furnace, the 3 friends were falling down inside into the midst of the flaming fire, fully clothed. Now the next verses describe the miraculous deliverance of God. And King Nebuchadnezzar simply could not believe his eyes. He saw the 3 friends no longer bound, and not only that, there was a 4th man walking with them in the midst of the flames. And oh, I love this part. It says, and it was not just any man, but Nebuchadnezzar himself said he had the appearance like the Son of God. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read that, I've often wondered, how did a heathen king know what the Son of God looked like? I believe that it was a God moment when the Holy Spirit gave revelation to this holy king. And even though Nebuchadnezzar perhaps had not given much thought to Daniel interpreting his dream or whatever, and as we read last week in chapter 2 where he said there was no God like Daniel's, I believe that this again was God speaking to Nebuchadnezzar and letting him know, Nebuchadnezzar, I am the one true God. You may make an image representing your gods of the Babylonian religion, but they are false. There is only one true God who not only can give a dream to someone who did not dream it, interpret that dream for you, but also has the ability of delivering 3 Hebrews out of a fiery furnace. The bounds of these 3 men had been removed by the flames, but nothing else had been consumed. That in and of itself was a miracle. No pain was being inflicted upon them by the flames, and they were enjoying the fellowship of the 4th person, because it says that they were seen walking in the midst of the flame, and I'm sure they probably were conversing. Nebuchadnezzar then came near to the mouth of the furnace and asked that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come out from the midst of the flame. He had just witnessed an amazing demonstration of the power of the Most High God and had been convinced of his supremacy. In admitting that he was the Most High God, Nebuchadnezzar was admitting that the God of the 3 Hebrew men was indeed the one true God. By calling them out of the furnace, he was admitting his defeat, and he made the miracle that had taken place in the furnace even more remarkable in the eyes of his counselors and others that were standing by. Verse 27 tells us that all the government officials were gathered together with the king when the 3 men emerged from the furnace, and they took note that the fire had not harmed their bodies, that the hair of their head had not been singed, that their garments remained unchanged, and this is the clincher right here, they did not even smell like smoke. Have you ever been camping and either roasting marshmallows to make s'mores, or perhaps you were roasting some hot dogs over the open flame or whatever it was, or there may just be the fact that you build a fire? Well, inevitably, it has been my experience that any time you build a fire like that, it's hard to escape without smelling like smoke. Because regardless of which side of the fire you move on, it's been my experience that the smoke likes to follow me around. I don't know if there's some kind of a magnet or what it is, but it just seems like the wind just kind of blows and you find yourself smelling like smoke. But here were 3 men that were actually in the midst of a fiery, hot furnace, 7 times hotter than usual. So hot that it actually had killed some of the strongest men in Nebuchadnezzar's army when they cast the 3 Hebrew children in. But now they did not have any indication of it other than the ropes which they had been bound previously had been burned off. But their flesh had not been charred in any way. Their hair had not been singed. Their clothing had not been burnt. And they did not even have the smell of smoke. Well, Nebuchadnezzar then issues a decree while his government officials are still present, because he wanted them to know this is something that I am speaking into law. And you remember that the law of a king, when they issued a decree, was something that was not able to be done away with by issuing another decree. Verse 29 tells us, therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language that speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses made a dunghill, because there is no other God who is able to deliver in this manner. After this event, Nebuchadnezzar honored the three young men by causing them to prosper. What this meant is specifically not indicated. They may have been promoted to higher positions, perhaps their financial income may have been increased, or their housing situation may have been improved. But whatever the honor that was shown, it must have been highly gratifying. When the three had stood before Nebuchadnezzar's image, with the announcement requiring them to bow ringing in their ears, it had seemed that they might lose it all. But God had worked matters out so that they actually were receiving much more than what they ever expected. Friend, here's something that I want you to remember. Even if we may be persecuted for our faith, it is important to put our trust in God and to persevere. When we are intimately familiar with God's word, we can rightly discern how to live in a way that honors and pleases God, and be able to identify situations when God's law is being violated by civil authority. If we truly live a life of faith, others may learn of God through our actions. Never forget that. Well, next week, we're going to be studying about another dream of King Nebuchadnezzar, and was fulfilled even during his own lifetime. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us this evening, and my prayer is that you have a better understanding of the importance of remaining true in your commitment to God, no matter what present circumstances might prove to be. I invite you and your family to join us this Sunday morning at 10 a.m. as we gather here at HFA to worship the Lord together. And my prayer is that God will bless you and you will have a wonderful rest of the week. Have a great evening.